Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this Microsoft 365 Development Bi-weekly community call, where we always talk about, well, different kind of developer topics around Microsoft 365. So this is the most probably versatile or random call, because we have different demos related on different capabilities in Microsoft 365, and which is something what we actually want to do more and more. So rather than thinking only specific services or specific APIs, let's talk about the solutions and capabilities what we can build in Microsoft 365. And that's what we can see also related on Microsoft Viva and a lot of the other updated messaging from Microsoft, which is concentrating on solutions. Now, today we actually start with PnP Framework and Core SDK update, then Pmp PowerShell, then your Teams and Microsoft Graph Toolkit, so what's happening on there. And then we will do a quick recap on the latest Microsoft Teams samples, a picture time, so to together mode, and then we have 3 cool demos coming up. So from Dan, related on remote event receiver manager solution in the SPFx. Chris Kent is going to do some list formatting magic. I have no idea, again, what he's doing, but he keeps on having all of these demos ready to go. And we chatted earlier this week. He actually, on Tuesday, he already knew what he's going to present. So I think that's going to be awesome. And then the last demo of today is RT Kumar, and she's going to basically talk about the new Microsoft Graph APIs to clock in and clock out of a shift, and what we can do with those APIs. It is actually really cool. I've seen the slides, and there's a good storyline related on what that means and what we can build together with those APIs. So really cool stuff. Just a quick recap on the opportunities of participating in the community. We really want people to do demos in this community course. So please reach out to any of the PnP team members. If you reach out to me and I don't have time to respond, that's not necessarily an optimal thing, but we'll try to get to you as fast as possible. Easiest way to really learn is by seeing somebody else to build something. You can absolutely contribute in GitHub. There's a lot of different channels there. And the most important thing is always provide feedback. Tell us what works, what doesn't work, so we at the Microsoft can fix things. So don't just yell that Microsoft is bad or whatever. Tell us why, so we can actually help you to be more successful in the future. Now, a few of the assets and URLs which we always have on these calls, and the reason why we have them, by the way, is that there's always new people in the call. So we have 2 different YouTube channels. We have the official Microsoft 365 developer YouTube channel, where we have developer videos coming from the engineering and from marketing. Then we have our community video channel, where we have all of the community call recordings and community demos in one location as well. We have a lot of open source assets. We have sample galleries, and some new sample galleries actually going to be released or talk about today. And then we, if you're wondering that there's too many URLs to remember, just actually one of them, which is AKMS M365 PnP. From there, you'll find all of the different assets which are available for you to take advantage. Now, a few of the things and updates as we are heading to summer time in the Northern Hemisphere, and we are seeing a lot of people actually being slightly tired on this remote conferences and remote sessions and meetings and all of that stuff. So we're going to have a summer break related on Microsoft Graph, Microsoft Teams, and SharePoint community calls. Some of the other community calls, we're still having a discussion with them. So SharePoint community call, Microsoft Teams community call will be kept in June, but in July and August will not have them. We'll actually do a blog post on all of the details in a second. As we restart this process, we also wanted to actually do some consolidation. So as you can see from this chart, there's quite a lot of different calls on different times, and they're not even consistently at 8 a.m. Pacific time or whatever. Some of them are at 7, some of them are at 8, some of them are at 9 in a different days throughout the month. And that's not an optimal situation. So what we're doing now is that we're going to merge some of these calls starting then from the end of August to a model where we still keep this Thursday 7 a.m. Pacific time, because this has been working really well for reaching out to people. So we're going to keep the M365 community call, this one, and the SPFx call on Thursdays. But then we'll introduce a merged an engineering call for Tuesday, which is happening 8 a.m. on Tuesday every single week. And that's basically at least a representative of Microsoft Graph, Microsoft Teams, and SharePoint. And for the rest of the course, we're still negotiating. Most likely identity is going to be merged on that one as well, and a few others. But we kind of start using the similar kind of a community call format in those calls as well. So 3 demos, intro, and the discussions in the start. So you will know that if you want to jump the intro discussions and the latest news, you'll just join quarter past and you'll get to the first demo. And of course, we'll share the agendas and everything else early on so you can actually jump on an exact demo because they will be 15-minute demo spots. So we're really moving into this model where it's more structural and more aligned. Now, some of those calls, monthly calls, will keep on being independent calls, most likely in the autumn as well. I think Office add-ins, as an example, said that they don't want to merge. They want to keep their existing once-a-month call, which is completely fine. So all good. Now, the whole point of here is basically that then you know when the calls are happening and it's consistent. I'm a big fan of consistency because then it means that we know when it's happening rather than is it that week or third week or second week or fourth week or what week or when is it happening. It happens every single week on Tuesday. And everything is getting recorded. So if you can't make it, all good. It's easier this way. Now, a few other updates. We have an ongoing Viva Connections preview. So if you're interested in starting building extensibility for Viva Connections, which is really the combination of Microsoft Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive. You can sign up for the Viva Connection private preview. In that sign-up form, we will ask you to sign up with the GitHub account and the URL where you want this preview capabilities to be enabled. GitHub account is needed for you to get access on the early version of SharePoint Framework 1.13, so the next version of SharePoint Framework, because we use SharePoint Framework to build extensibility for Viva Connections. And as part of this, you'll get access then on hands-on labs and early bits, and you can build stuff, and then also a discussion forum together with engineering. So quite nice way of getting insights on what's coming in the future as well. Now, a few other updates, recap on the Microsoft 365 Extensibility Lookbook. We all the time get questions on that. Developers are saying that I don't know what I can build with Microsoft 365. I don't know what is the business scenarios or what's possible. That's what Microsoft 365 Extensibility Lookbook is designed for. So you can go here, you can have a look on the different scenarios and business ideas. There's even business scenarios which are demonstrated with design examples, which you can use for innovating your own products. So there's a lot of assets available. And from this location, then we'll link back on the YouTube videos and documentations and samples and all of that. So really cool asset. Of course, since we are in Microsoft 365 community call, we also want to promote our samples and other assets. For example, Microsoft Teams development. If you're into that one, have a look on AKMS Teams samples. That is a gallery dedicated for Microsoft Teams. And we actually have a new gallery, which we haven't talked about in the past. So Paul Bullock, who's an MVP from KPA Interactive, is leading this effort. And we basically started collecting scripts throughout the Microsoft 365 tenant management. And we also welcome contributions on this. Basic idea is then why is it so hard to find always the one script which you need for automating something? Why wouldn't we just write script samples and share them together with the community so that people can easily access them? And that's what the script samples gallery is all about. So please have a look on that. Really cool stuff. It's a really nice design, by the way, as well. Also, just a reminder, for the next Tuesday, we have a Microsoft Teams monthly community call coming up with 3 different demos. So really cool stuff on there as well. We will promote that one tomorrow and Monday, of course, as well. But we will have Stefan, Satya, and Xenia talk about Microsoft Teams development next week. Now, then we'll go to the sharing is caring thing, and I will throw the microphone to David.
Awesome. Thank you, Vesa. Well, friends, we have a ton of resources, as you've seen, available to you. Samples and code and all kinds of things that you can utilize within the community. But it may feel a little overwhelming to take advantage of some of these resources, and we'd love for you to contribute back at some point. That too might provide a certain hurdle to you. So Sharing is Caring is an initiative and a program within PnP that provides hands-on guidance on how to accomplish some of these tasks. If you would like to just start using the samples, you can join one of these sessions. For example, the using PnP SPFx samples within VM. All of our samples are always tested, so we know they work, but there can be some hurdles in terms of knowing how to manage the versions of Node and SPFx to get them to work. Conversely, you may want to contribute, but you're not quite sure how to start getting involved with GitHub and the pull request process. So all these sessions are hands-on, safe space, inclusive opportunities. They're not recorded. They're absolutely free opportunities for you to collaborate, ask questions, and get involved with others in the community. They're scheduled every month. We've got more session topics coming soon. We've also got AMAs. We just finished a Graph and MGT AMA earlier this week that went fantastic. And in July, we've got one scheduled for Teams development with our guests, Victor and Bob German. So be on the lookout for that to get scheduled in July. Again, all of them are free. Welcome you to join any of them, aka.ms/sharing is caring. Vesa, back to you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, David, on that one. And then we'll do a quick recap on the project. So let's start with the PnP.NET libraries. Bert, I can see you on the call.
Yes, thank you, Vesa. Yay, we had a release. PnP Core SDK version 1.2.0 is out. Key new things in this release are the ability to call any REST or Graph call yourself. Like the Core SDK is a wrapper around REST and Graph. But now you can, if it's not available in Core SDK, you can just write your own calls and just use the plumbing that we have to make it happen. Interactive calls, batch calls, all these things are possible with your custom Graph and REST calls then. And the second thing is we have interop support with PnP Framework and the Microsoft Graph SDK. So if you want to mix and match things, which is a common thing to do, then it's quite easy now. You just use Graph SDK when you want and combine it with PnP Core SDK, for example, to get the Pages API functionality, or use PnP Framework in combination with PnP Core SDK. Everything is possible now. Good. We also released PnP Framework version 1.5 in this case. What's new? Main new thing is the new provisioning schema, the March 21 schema. That's the default schema in the PnP framework. Now, we implemented the schema, but we didn't implement the actual functionality. So that's coming, but the schema is there, so you can have a look at what's coming, and you can, if you want, to also contribute and already implement part of the new schema. We already talked a bit about PnP Framework and PnP Core SDK, about the releases that we did. There's a ton of people that helped achieving those, so thanks for those guys that helped. Really appreciate the work. Maybe one thing to call out still is that we actually also removed old and deprecated schemas from PnP Framework. We had them laying around we never really deleted them. We deprecated them, but we never removed them. Now they're gone. So only 2019 or later schemas are in PnP Framework in the current version 1.5. And overall usage stays around more or less 90,000 tenants a month. It went a little bit down from 95,000, but it kind of is natural to go a bit up and down. But so pretty massive usage as well, I would say. Cool. I think that sums up for me.
Excellent. Thank you, Bert, on that one. Then let's jump on the Pmp PowerShell. Erwin, I can see you on the call.
Yep. We also have a release 1.6. Basically, all the changes that happened in the PnP Framework and Core SDK, they, as always, automatically drill down to PowerShell, so that's good. The thing about the template schema, as Bert mentioned, yeah, so also in PnP PowerShell, they are gone. Everything before the version 2019, or that the ones that we released in 2019 are gone. If you have all templates lying around and you want to convert them over, it's a matter of doing a read PnP side template into a variable. So you read your template into a variable, and then you save PnP side template, and you define which schema or version you will want to save it as, and it will automatically update your template to a newer model. And from that moment on, you can just pick the latest one, and from that moment on, you can use them again if you want to. We added some functionality to set PnP tenant, and I just realized actually there is a command that I missed mentioning here, but we now also have functionality to add the content types from the content type. From a hub site. So there's some functionality there added actually very recently.
That's actually a really cool feature. You can push the content types from the content type hub to all of the site collections. That's really very cool.
Indeed.
Cool.
That's it.
Cool. Let's jump to Victor with the updates on your teams.
Yes, so we also had a new release, and actually we're a little bit better than the rest. We are already on version 3, so 3.2 was released. we most significantly it's been backend updates, but we also had the support for Schema 1.10 and the new JavaScript SDK 1.10. We improved some conflict resolution when it comes to scaffolding over an existing project or existing files. But the most interesting thing is that we have a new deployment package. That means that when you run ngrok serve or something like that, you can append the publish parameter to that and automatically publish your manifest package directly into the Teams App Store. And under the hood, we're actually using the M365 CLI to do all of that. And that is in the new package, Teams Deploy. The other interesting thing, if we look at statistics, is that the React component library we're using, actually the increase compared to the rest is about 30%, and that's due to the new Teams Toolkit released at Build as well. So it's the same React hooks being used by Teams and the Teams Toolkit. But yeah, there's a lot of exciting things. But if you go to the next slide, I think the coolest thing is actually that we released something called the Teams Quickstart, the PnP Teams Quickstart. And that's a way for you to start with essentially open up code spaces, which is a Visual Studio hosted in your browser with a container in the backend. So you can automatically and super fast just quickly scaffold out the project and then with one command line, run it, deploy it to your Teams tenant and test your application without having anything installed locally on your machine. So I think this is really cool, and this is just the beginning of what we'll do with code spaces, and expect to see more things in there. Right now, we don't support automatically updating the Azure AD apps and the bot endpoints, but that's something I'm working on right now. Thanks.
And that's a cool statement on the end, which says build a Teams app faster than Chris can format the list. That's fast, by the way. So that's super fast. We can see that with Chris's demo later today. Now, Beth is on the call related on the updates on the Microsoft Graph Toolkit.
Thank you, Vesa. So the latest update is still v2.2. If for some of you who doesn't know what Microsoft Graph Toolkit is, it's a collection of reusable and framework agnostic components and authentication providers for accessing and working with the graph. These components are fully functional right out of the box, and the authentication providers will help you connect with Microsoft Graph and fetch data for you. For 2.2, we had a lot of community contributors, so props to all of them for helping us make it possible. Also, one of the, if you look at the right side, we have something in preview that is multi-user login that you can try out today. So download the package at Microsoft/mgt@next.multi-accounts to try it out for us if you want to. Give us feedback. As far as the roadmap, we're planning new components and authentication providers for the next fiscal. If you attended Build, one of the announcement that we made at Build together with Fluent UI is we're going to refresh all of our components to build on top of Fluent UI web components so that everything at Microsoft that's web components will be aligned with the look and feel and functionalities. So if you want to see something get changed, or if you have opinions on what are the new components and authentication providers that we should build for the new fiscal, let us know. Head over to aka.ms/mgt and file an issue. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Beth, on that one. And then let's do a quick recap on the latest samples on the team side.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, we have a cool new sample this week from the amazing Marcus Moeller, who is very prolific with his samples. This one solves an interesting problem. I'm sure a lot of you have done this in SharePoint. You have an app, people enter some data to configure the app, and you need to store that data somewhere. So we've all used the SharePoint property bags. We've all used maybe a hidden list. What do you do if you're not in SharePoint? Well, it turns out that Azure actually has an app configuration resource that's designed to do exactly this thing. And Marcus has brilliantly connected the dots here and given us a sample that shows how to use Azure's built-in configuration resource so you can make your Teams apps configurable. Check it out today at the URL shown. He also has a great blog article, and we're going to try to get him in on one of these upcoming community calls to actually show it in action. That's it. Excellent. For this week.
Thank you, Bob, on that one. And then we are slightly behind of the schedule, but it's fine. Let's do a quick group photo. I will start the recording. For those who wants to join the group photo, enable your video. and I will move in this one in here, and let's see how fast we can get the 50 seats filled in this room really fast. It's typically happening super fast. I think we're missing one row at least still. Let's wait a few more seconds, one more 20 seconds. I think that's filling up. I think we're still I think that's the limit right now. Still extending. Okay, let's do some hand waving, everybody. So thanks, everybody. Have a great Thursday, and thank you for joining on the community call. We'll grab a brief animation out of this one as well. Thank you for being part of this. Cheers, everybody. And let's then jump into the demo section. And we're going to start with Dan, related on remote event receivers manager solution in SPFx for managing list events.
Yeah, so actually the sample is not that interesting, but what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing a quick demo on it. And then I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the magic of remote event receivers.
Absolutely.
And why they're really awesome if you know when to use them. So I'll just go ahead and share my screen.
There we go. Now we can see it. Yep, take
awesome.
it away.
So my name is Dan. I'm a Microsoft 365 and SharePoint consultant at EvoBiz. We're a small company in Denmark specializing in helping businesses implement Microsoft 365 and SharePoint. Just a few quick notes on why I made this demo. There's been a change in the PnP PowerShell, the latest version, where we're now using app-only authentication. And when you apply a remote event receiver using app-only authentication, we experienced that it doesn't actually execute the remote event receiver. It turns out that you need a app-only principle to do that. And sometimes that's just not convenient when you just need to really quickly apply a remote event receiver. So I figured, well, if we're using user authentication, it actually works. So can we do this through REST? I couldn't find any documentation on whether the SP REST endpoint supported it. So I figured might as well just try. And I went ahead and tried, and it worked. So that's the use case for this demo or sample. Then I'm just going to be talking about what is a remote event receiver and when to use one and when to use Power Automate. So if we just pull in here, this is the demo of the web part. So it's really simple. All it does is it lists the lists you have on your site. So you can see we have this one here called "You Can Create Items Here," which is just a list. And I've added a remote event receiver called PnP Sample Block Create, which really all it does is it's a synchronous remote event receiver that just tells you can't create the item here. So what we will see is we get a custom error message. So it says PnP is awesome, and so are remote event receivers. These messages can actually be customized because remote event receivers, it's just a SOAP protocol, so you can return really any message you want. And I'll get to why that's really awesome in just a minute. We can also do them asynchronous so that you can add something and then remotely there's a server doing some work and it can fill out a field. So this one just clones the title into title cloned, but you could potentially be doing other things there. What the sample allows you to do is just get a quick overview of these. You can see it's there, you can delete it, or you can add a new one. So it's really just to quickly manage it and so that you can get an overview of what's going on because there's no UI way to do this. So you'd either have to connect with PowerShell or go through the REST API. Going back to the presentation, I'm going to be talking a little bit about what is a remote event receiver. So essentially what it is, in this case, the whole demo is focused on remote event receivers on lists. They do exist in other parts of the platform as well. They're a way to listen for events or get a trigger when something happens. So for instance, when an item is created in a SharePoint list, you can trigger a Azure function or really whatever. You can host it on any web server. You can then use that to write data back to the list. So you could do some kind of advanced calculated fields, or you could potentially do, like we just saw before, you can do verification. So you can actually use, for instance, 2 fields and generate a unique primary key across 2 fields to say you can't have these 2 fields be identical with another list item. You can also because we're in a web server and we have code, you can do really whatever you want. So you could send the data to an external service. Say you're doing your own audit log on some other system, or you could go ahead and get data from another service and write that back to the list in case you're doing integrations to perhaps a time tracking system or something. So that's all really cool, but a lot of this can actually be done using Power Automate. So when would you want to use that instead? Because I mean, obviously Power Automate is always preferred, and using Power Automate, we can easily do this thing where something changes. Okay, a Power Automate script or Power Automate flow, I think they're called, does something and writes that back to the list. But one of the use cases where I at least often feel that Power Automate really is not that awesome is, say you have the 6 identical lists or 20 because you're using provisioning to roll out these lists. You're suddenly very limited in what you can do in Power Automate. I've recently seen some really cool blog posts of people actually writing Power Automate scripts that can run across flows that can run across a large amount of lists, but you always end up using a lot of I don't want to say hacks, but you end up customizing the Power Automate to a point where it's no longer a power user tool; it's almost a developer tool. And in that case, I generally would prefer actually using a remote event receiver. Again, in this case, I'm just using an Azure Function logo because it's something hosted in the cloud. And you can do this whole thing where instead of having one list, you can actually have 6 or 7 lists or 20 if you want. So you're suddenly able to you do the same thing, but across a lot of lists. So what are some of the pros and cons of this? I mean, a huge pro is the reusability. You can actually go ahead and use it across many lists. Also, this whole synchronous and asynchronous thing. So using Power Automate, we can't actually block a user from creating a list item. We could potentially delete it afterwards if it's not an allowed operation. But this whole having custom error messages to tell the user what you're entering currently is invalid and not allowed, and just stopping them from creating, that's a really powerful tool. It's something that's been in the platform for, as far as I know, a very long time, but just you don't really see it used all that often anymore. I didn't even know it supported modern UI until I tested it out for this demo. But also the whole aspect of them actually running, I say instantly, but say you're running the asynchronous one, it happens really fast. It's not the 5-minute trigger you have on a flow. And I believe webhooks also have a 5-minute trigger-ish. So this really snappy performance you can actually get. Also, we get, I put in quotes, unlimited power. Because we're running backend code, we're able to use things like CSOM or the PnP Framework. So we can really do very powerful things. We can do third-party integrations that don't necessarily work that well with Flow. And we don't need a premium license to make an HTTP request to some platform, which might not even support REST, and you might have to do other things. So some of the downsides are it uses code, which means we're no longer in the power user suite of things, where Power Automate, you can teach a user how to build their own and how to maintain it. So that's kind of a problem, that you're really stuck with code that needs to be compiled and hosted somewhere. And that's the other thing. You need to host this somewhere, and you can host it in Azure, and that works. But sometimes when you're working with a client, it can be kind of a thing where you're like, oh, I need an Azure subscription. It's not going to cost that much, but we need to host it there. And the client will be like, but I don't want to pay an extra subscription. I already have Power Automate. Why can't we use that? So that's sometimes a bit of a hassle. Then they're harder to see, put in quotes again. So one of the things I've had sometimes is if you're helping a new client who already has an existing setup that some other developers worked on, there might actually be a remote event receiver there, but you don't really have an overview of what's going on. This is also where the sample can be used, because you can actually click in, you can see which remote event receivers on which lists. But that also leads into the black box aspect of it. So we have some code running somewhere in the cloud, but we don't know what it does. There's no easy way to see the code. You can't actually see it because it can be hosted on any environment. So we don't know what does this do. We can create a list item, we can see what happens, but does it do other things? That's really hard to tell. Whereas with the flow, you can open it up, you can look at it. Another thing that we get is the retry logic and handle logging from Power Automate, where we get this really nice overview of when has this Power Automate run, did it fail, did it go well? We don't really get that with remote event receivers. They're kind of fire and forget. So if it fails, it fails. You can obviously use application insights to have a look at if your job failed or not. So another thing you could do is using queues, and you can actually, whenever the remote event receiver triggers, you can write to a queue instead of just executing your code and saying, okay, I'm done. So there's definitely some pros and cons for both. And generally, I think you should try to prefer Power Automate because it is more maintainable. It is more of a, I don't know what you say, so supported feature set. It feels more native to the platform, and you don't need to do custom code, which, I mean, some of us are developers, we love coding, but we also need to try and use the tools that we get from the Microsoft team. And that's pretty much it for me. Thank you.
Cool. Really good summary, Dan. And there was a question related on deprecation plans on the remote event receivers, and there's no explicit plans as such. It is an older technology, which we introduced many years ago before Craft even existed, but it does work. The challenge there is that like Dan noted out, is the retry logic. So if there would be a native network disconnectivity between SharePoint Online and Azure or whatever, then there would not be a failure handling or an exception handling on that. But really cool summary. Thank you, Dan, on that. And let's then move to Chris Kent. Let's see what Chris has on his mind today. I have no idea what he's going to present again. So let's see. And Chris, remember, this is a family show.
No, I didn't realize this. I have to change my entire demo. All right. So I'm Chris. Let's move in. All right. So, and I'll get rid of Vesa. We don't need him. All right. So, you may be familiar with the list formatting samples repo. It's a very popular repository PnP offers, right? We've got 100+ odd samples. You can head on over here to GitHub and you can browse directly here, right? We showed the new sample browser, and the list formatting samples are going to be added to that very shortly. We also have this kind of site here with some different ways to look at things and some tips on how to get going. And all of that's great, and absolutely should use those resources. But sometimes what you'd like, right, instead of just coming in here and you click on a view sample and you go to bulletin board format and you see screenshots, and that's cool, and then there's instructions on how to create this in your own environment, right? Here's the view requirements and everything here, and that's cool, and that works really well. And for the bulk of our samples, that is absolutely the way to go. Something new put together here, and I'd like to get some feedback and see how we like this, is the idea of a kind of a showcase site. And so this is a communication site that's got several samples kind of all grouped together. In this case, we're looking at several of the chart samples. And this can be applied to your own tenant using PnP remote provisioning with PnP PowerShell. There's some instructions and a template for you. Those templates include files, includes all the list items, and all the formats. So you can just kind of spin up a site, apply that format, and then you can start playing around with these formats. So I want to take a look at this site, and I want to take a look at some of our amazing samples. We've got awesome contributors all over the world doing some really amazing things. If you haven't had a chance to look at these, charting is something that comes up a lot. Now in SharePoint Online, you've got the ability to, there's a chart web part. You can do other things where you embed some, variety of things. There's a lot of ways to solve the charting problem, but sometimes you want to do a chart directly inside your list or using just your list data, right? And that's where formatting can really come in handy. So we'll start with a couple of column samples here. So a real easy one here is taking a look at the generic timeline. And so this is coming from our friend Tetsuya Kawahara out of Japan, a recent MVP, a huge contributor on the list formatting samples repo. And this is a fairly simplistic format. We've got some other very interesting timeline type formats. And the idea here with this format, again, this is just a web page, right? We've got links to these samples here. Anything you want to find out about the author over here, right? If we want to just open that over on GitHub, we can go and see it there and do the README and everything else we need for looking for extra details. But here we can actually play with it, right? Because this is actually on our site. It's a timeline. We can see that it's got a nice hover card. And if we wanted to change that data, for instance, we could go directly to that list. And then we can come in here and we can actually change things around, right? So in this case, the timeline works by if there is something in the column, right? Just anything at all, it's going to then put a dot, and then you're going to put that information here. That's not always super obvious from the screenshot and everything else, and so this allows you to really try that out. So this is an awesome timeline. It just creates a nice little line with dots right down your row. You can have multiple of those here. Very, very simple to apply. Just cut and paste. Now, if we head back here, let's take a look at another one. So a number gauge. So this comes up a lot. By default, you can do like a data bar, and let's zoom in a little bit here, right? But an actual gauge that shows like a percentage field, which is what we have here, is available to you as well. All right, so you can see this progress here. There's two different versions of it. There's one where red's on the left and green's on the right, and one that's the exact opposite where green's on the left and red's on the right. And you can apply this very easily to, a number column. You can also do this with like the data bars. There's a couple of visualizations, but this is a really nice one, really sample to get you going on that. All right, let's take a look over here. So then we've got this brand new one also from Tetsuya. Right, so this is a inline Gantt chart, which is really, really cool. So this is designed to be viewed a year at a time, right? So it'll just take some dates here from inside your view and apply a really nice visualization here. So you can imagine using this inline, just try and get an idea of what a project's going on or any number of ways, and then you could certainly expand this, to be a little larger. For instance, this one actually works exactly that way, right? So as your column width grows, so does your Gantt chart. So very, very cool sample from Tetsuya. And then we come back here and we've got like a column chart also from Tetsuya. I said big contributor. But the idea here is it's just taking numbers, and this is an example. You'd probably want to customize this for whatever your columns are. But the idea of displaying these on an inline chart is really, really powerful. Again, gives you that nice inline visualization without having to affect the entire view. So you can use that inside grouping or whatever else you need because it is a column format. All right, so we've got a few more column formats we're going to add here that are related to charting. We'll get that added here before we hit the publish button. But there's also a bunch of view samples. So if you wanted to do more than just the inline, you want to take the entire view and you want to format that into a chart, there's a number of options for you. So we'll take a look at the chronological format. And this is from Frank, I'll just say. And this is a really neat one. So the idea is here, it provides this detail here, and it's just a strict visualization. There's no interactivity. You can see it's very, very clean. And if you click over here, you can actually see the list item data behind it. All of these have an all items view, so you can see the actual data behind it, what goes into that format, and then you can switch it over to the chart view and see it in action. And then, of course, if you wanted to just jump right into it, you can not edit current view. You could format the current view. Let's just close that guy. You can always format the current view and see it in action and change whatever you need to here, right? So if we didn't like neutral coordinate right there, we could say, neutral primary, which I don't think is going to look dramatically different. There you go. But the idea is here, you can quickly customize this, try it out right here in the browser without having to understand all of the ins and outs of moving things around in GitHub. All right, let's see. We've got a couple more minutes. I'm going to just highlight a couple more of these. Then I just closed my site. What is my, there we go. All right. So now we can take a look at so we've got a nice project Gantt chart. So we looked at a Gantt chart that was inline. We've got this one. And I'm going to just call you GDK Max because that's what I refer to you as from GitHub. I'm sorry. Maybe guarantee. I don't want to say it properly. So awesome contributor. Done all sorts of cool stuff. But check this out. So you can take this list and make an actual inline Gantt chart. These are individual list items and kind of just lays them all out based on a project timeline. Very powerful. And then, of course, we have this column graph format from our friend Anoop, who has put together a full-on bar chart here, or column chart, right? So you can see it. It's got interactivity. It's marking the top ones, right? It's very, very cool. It's drawing it in line right there. He's got another one very similar. So if you wanted to go for the bar graph format, right? So again, if you want to just go sideways on that, very, very cool with some extra image functionality added in here. And then, of course, another one from Tetsuya is a butterfly chart. So the idea here is you've got two different numbers, with text here. Now he's showing some really cool things in that if you change the display name of this column, for instance, it's going to show up here just like that. So if we, for instance, we go here and we see all, we're going to go to our all items, just so we can see those. So if we change this cost right here, column settings, and we're just going to, edit that so we can rename it. We're going to call it cost with an exclamation point because that's A great name. All right, so we do that, and then we look back at our chart. You can see that we hover over this, it's already taking advantage of that. So again, really cool chart, but it's also showing how to take advantage of some advanced functionality, such as pulling in column metadata. All right, and I think we're just about done here. One more is our timeline format. So we've seen a few of these, again, from Tessia. This one has two different options. It's got a vertical timeline, and it has a horizontal timeline. And this timeline has a click to see all of the things that have happened at those times. And very, very cool to give you the different options on seeing how those hover cards are integrated, and you control the entire view and how you can see that in a web part. All right, so in summary here, we've got a lot coming here. With all of these samples, we're going to try and make this a little easier to digest and use, which is a great way to set this up as kind of a series of learning portals. If you're trying to encourage your power users how to learn formatting and take advantage of some of these samples, rather than sending them out to GitHub, which you certainly can. You can help them start here directly with data they can manipulate and adjust. And that's about it for me.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris, and also fixing our scheduling. Because I took too long time on the intro, but really awesome stuff, absolutely brilliant stuff, and helps on driving an understanding how this can be built. And we'll certainly work on getting the template out and more easily available, maybe in a lookbook and then outside of lookbook and all of the videos, how to get installed that and all of that. So really, really cool stuff. Thank you, Chris, from Dan. The only just the feedback on the demo. We didn't have any horses on this one.
This is true.
And I still laugh for the fact that every single time we reference anything on horses, because we saw quite a few of them in the chat, think about those people who never actually seen you present and they have no idea what that reference is all about. Now, like RT is first time presenter from Microsoft in this call, and let's jump to her. And probably she's wondering what was that horse is all about. But let's not focus on that. Let's focus on her and what's new on the Microsoft Graph APIs from a clock in and out on the shift perspective.
Thanks, Vesa. Yeah, I was wondering what the horses were about, but maybe another time. Let me go ahead and quickly present my screen.
We are good to go. Take it away.
Awesome. So hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening to wherever you are in the world. My name is Arti Kumar. I'm a product manager at Microsoft for the Teams Shifts application. And today we're going to talk about the time clock APIs that we recently released. And so before I kind of go into the APIs themselves, you might be wondering what is time clock and what is shifts. And so I thought I'd give you a little context setting over there on what that is. So shifts is a, if you're not aware, it's a first-party scheduling and time and attendance application on Teams. And it's mainly catered towards frontline workers, but we also do have, workers that primarily sit at a desk. So IT and information workers tend to use it mainly for if they're, on-call schedules. But the primary use cases are for frontline workers that work on shifts. Shifts is catered towards the employees, empowering them to manage their schedules on the go using our self-service tools. Shifts is available across all of the Teams platforms, so it's available on web, desktop, but it's also available on your mobile interfaces, which is where we find most of the frontline workers where they live. And then for managers, it saves them a ton of time because we're giving them a lot of autonomy to digitize a lot of these workflows that they traditionally might use pen and paper or Excel spreadsheets to manage their schedules. A lot of times you'd still find that in a lot of big organizations. So this just provides them an easy way to automate all of that. The time tracking component, which is the time clock module within the Shifts application. That's the API that we're going to be talking about today and that we have shipped. That provides employees quick clock in and clock out capabilities, so they can clock in and out of their shifts. They can add breaks. They can go back in and edit their time cards and use all of that, and then the manager can view that and then push that to their payroll system for payroll processing. And with our APIs, we've got a ton of already available released Graph APIs for most of these scheduling, for all of the scheduling capabilities. The time tracking component is the last one that we have released recently. And usually we find this to be mostly an integration with a third-party workforce management system. So you may have, your customers may be working on existing systems of record, such as Chronos or Blue Yonder, Reflexis, SAP, ADP, Ceridian, Workday. I'm just throwing out a few of the big names. We do support a few connectors for some of these workforce management systems, and all of them are powered through the Graph APIs themselves that we're going to talk about. But you know, this is they're open APIs for you to be able to use to your needs. And lastly, Shifts is used by over millions of users today. So we're seeing a lot of positive growth in the space. I wanted to kind of quickly talk through what the Shifts application itself looks like, and maybe walk through some of the time clock scenarios that you might want to enable when you use the, basically, what does an integration look like when you use the time clock APIs? I won't spend a lot of time on what the integration might look like for some of the scheduling capabilities, just because the focus of today's demo is on the time clock component of the Shifts application itself. So for managers, I have an image over here that shows the desktop and the mobile view. They can, you can, you know, let's say you're using an Excel spreadsheet, you can import your schedules if you're using that, and then export it back out. We also have the ability for you to directly build your schedules within the Shifts app. But of course, we have Graph APIs as well, where you can import it and sync any scheduling information if you're already using it in another system of record. You can, as a manager, you can, let's say you need extra shifts for the day, that you need some employees to come in and cover. You can create open shifts. You can also manage all of your employee requests within the application itself. For the frontline worker, you the mobile interface is a little bit more catered towards the frontline worker and their experience, mostly because you know, they're either on the shop floor or on the you know, processing line. So they're typically on the go, and they're usually on some sort of mobile interface. You can view your own schedules, you know, what's upcoming. Let's say you're working across multiple locations. You work for a retail store and there are multiple branches that you work across. You can see all of your shifts across those different store locations. You can see any, you know, if you want to make a few extra bucks, you can pick up extra open shifts. You can manage your requests. You can request time off, or if you want to swap your shift or you can't make your shift, you want to swap it with another employee and make sure that, you know, you give up your shift, but it's also being covered by someone who can take up that shift based on whatever skills that are required for the shift, or making sure that they don't go over time. You can do all of that within the Shifts app. And then the time clock component is the other part that facilitates an employee to be able to clock in and clock out. So you can start your you can start your shift, basically clock in and clock out. You can also start a break. You can start multiple breaks and stop them. And then let's say that you forgot to, you know, you worked today from 8 to 5, but you took a couple of short coffee breaks and you forgot to punch in for one of them. You can go back in the next day, or you know, even after you clock out, and go back and edit your time cards. And then eventually, once you're happy with your timesheet, you can confirm that, so that the manager will then be able to process that for payroll. Time clock is available on the mobile interface as well as on the desktop. In some industries, they don't, or even some organizations do not provide employees you know, work tools on their personal devices, or they don't provide them with any shared devices. And so a lot of times employees need to come in to clock into their shift. And so there was asks on, we need to support this on desktop as well. And so we did recently, last year, ship the time clock capabilities within the desktop and web view. So what does it look like to integrate your payroll and time and attendance system? So your SAP or Ceridians of the world with Shifts being the front-end application within Teams, where your employees would clock in and clock out and manage their time and attendance. I'm going to walk you through a few scenarios, things that we find most commonly used, but that isn't to say that you can't expand this to other scenarios that you see fit. So a typical scenario, worker comes into their shift, they pull up the Teams application, scroll to the Shifts app within that, and then I've highlighted over here the time clock component within the Shifts application. And so let's say you've already integrated Shifts using our time clock APIs to your payroll system. When the worker clocks in, if you've registered to the Webhook API, Shifts will then automatically sync that back to the payroll system via your application. So we do support real-time synchronous changes or notifications on any changes that are made within Shifts. Similarly, let's say that a worker goes back in and needs to edit their time card. So they'll go back into the time clock module, they'll find the time card that they want to edit, they'll go ahead and make all the edits, and then all of that. So we support for every action within Shifts really, but specifically within time clock in this specific scenario. We support we support the CRUD operations, but we also support those webhooks so that any changes that are made by the user in real time, you'll get notified and gets auto synced. And this is, in fact, we've had customers who've waited for that webhook component to be released before they could start integrating the time clock capabilities with their payroll system, simply because what we've heard is that, it's a lot of manual work for an employee to have to clock in and clock out in one system, and then the manager needs to keep track of what they clocked in and clocked out, and kind of have that communication with the user offline, and ensure all of their timesheets are accurate, and then go in and manually punch it, versus having this automated. Right, so there's no confusion, there's no room for human error. I mean, there's room for, I guess, technical errors, but so that just automates it and makes everyone's life a lot easier. So, like I mentioned, we already have a full suite of Graph APIs supported for all of your Shifts scheduling capabilities, and I have a snapshot over here. I actually couldn't get the full snapshot because I had to scroll. But basically, if you go to the Graph document, the docs page, and you look at the V1 version, when you scroll down to Teams, under Teams, there will be Shifts. And that's basically your repertoire of all of the Shifts APIs that we support. And you can see all the different entities that we support. And if you expand on each of those, you'll see all of the different APIs that we support for each of those entities. And for the time clock component of it, so just like you see on the left-hand side, Shifts, schedule, scheduling groups, so on and so forth. If you scroll down past time off, you'll see what I show on the right-hand side, which is the time card entity, and then that's the expanded view where you're seeing the time card resource. And then all of the different APIs and operations that we support on that entity. So We do support, your basic CRUD operations, read, writes, deletes, list, views, but we also support specific actions that you can perform on behalf of that user. So you can clock in, you can clock out, start and stop a break, and you can confirm the timesheet. So I wanted to give a quick view of what the time card resource would look like. I'm not going to read through all of the properties, but you can kind of see that we do support all of the fields that you would see, and it's basically a representation of what a user would see on the user interface. So it's fully supported that way. We also, on all of our APIs, but I wanted to specifically call this out, we do support both user delegated permissions as well as app permissions. And so this is also on the documentation page, which if you scroll, you'll see. And for the application permissions, we do require you to pass in a header, and I have it at the bottom over here. It's the MS acts as header, and what you would pass over there is the user ID on behalf of whom the application is making this request. Without which you will get thrown an error, and so I just wanted to make that call out, so that's something that you don't miss. And lastly, like I mentioned, the webhook capabilities. It's a webhook API that you can register against. And it's specific to the Shifts application. So this is only within the Shifts capabilities that you would get notified of any changes that a user makes. It's called the Workforce Integration API. It's a bit of a confusing name if you're not if you're not aware of what a workforce system is. But the reason we gave that is basically because you can register your application as an integration between two workforce systems, Shifts being one, and what we would imagine that you're integrating with is another workforce management system. And that's why it's called the Workforce Integration API. And so this API is exclusively a webhook API where you can register your integration. You'll get back like a integration ID for that specific instance of the integration. But let's say that you have two instances of Kronos, one in Europe, where your customers, the customer has one region in Europe, one region in the US, and they have two different instances of Kronos that they're running against, and they have different configurations. The Europeans maybe don't really care about swap requests, and the US do. And so you can have two sets of integrations that are configured slightly differently. And so you would use the Workforce Integration API to register your integration twice as two separate instances, even though they're running basically on the same code, and you would just configure it a little differently. And the supports property on the Workforce Integration API. There's a lot of different values that we support. Basically, all of the different entities that you can listen for changes on. And the most recent one that we have added is the time card that I've highlighted over there. That is specifically the value that you would use when you want to listen for any changes that are made within the Shifts app on the time clock module. And then I have a screenshot of of an example of what the call would look like from Shifts when you've registered with the Workforce Integration for time card. So any clock in, clock out changes that a user makes, there's request examples of what that would look like from Shifts, so you know how you need to receive that request and handle it appropriately. And I think that's all I had. I don't know if we're at time or if we have some time for questions.
We are on time, but if there's any questions, people can ask them in the chat, and we can follow up on that. But let me then thank you, Artie. Really good coverage, and I like the fact that we showed some business scenarios what we can build using this, and because that always helps some people understanding not just the technical API, but rather, okay, what can I do with the API, which is a really, really big part of that. Thank you for that one. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Chris, as well. Really cool demos today. We'll have the recording coming out in 24 hours in Microsoft 365 Community YouTube channel, where we have all of the community call demos and community call recordings in the future. And follow us on Twitter. The next Microsoft 365 general community call is in 2 weeks from now. SharePoint Framework community call in 17th, so a week from now. And as we talked about, we're looking into merging some of these community calls. We will get new blog post details on the summer break pretty soon as well. But all of this is happening in the upcoming days. But thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the week, and let's stay in touch. Thank you. Bye-bye.